like when the time approached for us to decide that we want to take our own path and build a next generation platform of everything that we've seen, it was essentially trying to build a product that we always wish we had. We knew exactly what our future customers will want. I don't think there's a blueprint for success, but there's some general themes that are probably universal across businesses. But I think the truth is 10 years ago, it was not easier to start a business than it is now. Arguably, it was harder.
Yeah.
Right? It was just different. It was just different, right? And I think like it's never going to be easy to start and build a business.
Right.
Just like it's not going to be easy to have a successful career if you're taking the path of just growing within being part of some company. Like none of it is like today's world is inherently very competitive. And I think, it's just all about how we become better versions of ourselves to be more successful, to be better members of the community, be better people when it comes to enabling your colleagues or business partners, and a lot of it comes from internal.
Founded in 2017, StartWell is Toronto's independent hub for innovators to collaborate. Our podcasts relate perspectives from the world's most diverse urban population to reflect unique insights into global business, media, and culture. Vitaly Pecherskiy, it is a pleasure to have you here at the StartWell event studio for the StartWell Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Beautiful space.
Thank you. It's one that's very versatile too. We've started doing podcasts here because we want to relate how easy it is for people to just like have conversations on camera. We could do it anywhere in any space. So that's where we're taking the kind of show outside of our podcast studio. But yeah, that makes for a really interesting, I think, atmosphere, right? So for our audience that can't see the whole room, it's a very expansive space.
Yeah. I feel like I'm in Interstellar or something like that somewhere.
Yeah, exactly, right? It's very cinematic. But yeah, we're here to talk about, business and your business. And
that's the topic I love talking about the most.
So let's start with it. So StackAdapt is the name of your company, right?
Correct.
It's now, am I right in saying it's like a decade old?
It's 10 years old.
Yeah.
2014 is when we launched the product.
Man.
Seems like yesterday. And
that's
at the same
good,
time, this was a long journey.
The beard has grown.
Not just grown, also becoming gray.
Honestly, tell me about it. For me, this is just the last 4 years.
This is the last 5 months.
Okay, so you said we founded the product in 2014.
Yeah.
Who was your co-founder? So you've got two partners.
Yeah, so myself and Ildar, we met working together. I joined a new job and he was introduced to me as we were working in sister companies.
Okay.
And he was introduced to me as basically my client. And we went for kind of like a coffee business meeting.
Yeah.
And just had instant connection over entrepreneurship. And he joined that company like a few weeks before me. So he was also in the job new. So we were learning the job, like our respective jobs together.
Yeah.
Seeing what's out there, what kind of software exists in the market. And we were essentially like when the time approached for us to decide that we want to take our own path and build a next generation platform of everything that we've seen, it was essentially trying to build a product that we always wish we had.
Which is a great place to be.
Yeah, exactly.
You're innovating on something.
Yeah, we just felt like we knew exactly what our future customers will want. But two of us, so he's a mechanical engineer. Okay. I have an education in finance, so neither of us could code. So the first question was like, well, how are we going to build this product?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, we need to find a technical co-founder to build a technology company. So I started, pounding my network, trying to find somebody. And I went on this website, which is called techcofounder.com.
Literally techcofounder.com.
Yeah. Which
this is interesting. Okay.
Ceased to exist almost instantly after.
You got the only good one.
Yeah. I messaged, everybody I could find. Only one guy responded.
Man.
And, he was like, yeah, I just moved back from New York. I was working there for a few years. Let's talk. And we met for coffee, and I was like, "This guy is legit. And Next thing you know, we three of us were like, okay, let's go equal founders and let's try to build it.
So I guess what was the company, or what were the companies that you were working at before this?
It was part of the larger holding company. So it was a network of agencies.
Oh.
So my first job out of school, I went into a small ad tech company,
Mm-hmm.
which actually built software. But that firm where I met Ildar was entirely services organization.
Okay.
So that's why we had a view into lots of different tools
That marketing
that
agencies
existed in
use.
the market.
And this is the agency world, like creative marketing agency.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and one of these like private equity backed ones with lots of brands. Or was
No,
it small?
this was just marketing and advertising agencies.
Okay. Um, and so what was if there was one kind of kernel to the problem that you were looking to solve, like what was the thing?
It's just overall complexity in the industry. The software that existed then and a lot of the ways platforms approach building or solving the problem that we're trying to solve within currently a fairly narrow use case of programmatic advertising is just having a very complex, for all intents and purposes, a marketplace of all kinds of point solutions that you can use to stitch together a usable product.
Yeah.
We said, well, how can we offer a solution to our customers, like a packaged, out of the box solution that would just work?
And you're talking cross platform, like let's paint the picture of my company. Okay. We're StartWell. Let's just pick one particular thing that we want to advertise. So as an advertiser, I want to tell people that we have media production services. So I'm thinking, okay, well, where are the people that I'm trying to reach? Maybe I do some cohort analysis, and what's the easiest path to them? A Google search. They are searching for blah 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 that I'm going to sell. So obviously there's synonymity there,
Yeah,
and they're potentially warm already as leads.
exactly.
So Google Ads now, could that be enough for me, or was that part of the problem that it wasn't enough? Like Google as a channel is not enough.
So it really depends on the company. For some companies, um, it's enough if you're smaller. For larger companies, it's not enough because they're essentially maximizing
Yeah.
everybody who's actively looking for a product. They need to invest in strategies to generate demand from more like upper funnel. And there are companies where search is just not the way people buy the products. So you need to get quite creative around how you generate that demand. I mean, with our software, we philosophically wanted to think of like, how can we get it to a point where you could get to pressing a button and it just works, right?
Yeah,
Obviously
that's the
easier
holy
said than
grail,
done.
right?
Yeah. It's much more complex than that. But we always challenge ourselves of how can we build a great user experience for people to get access to great, fast, intuitive software, and then how can we do as much as possible in terms of decisioning using like things like automation or machine learning to make choices that people make on the product be as close as the ones that necessary to produce outcomes, and sort of stitching it all together into a solution.
Yeah.
There's a lot more to it. Like that to build a successful business, it's not enough to just do that, right?
It's not just about the product, and the product works, and you love the product, and people tell their friends, and everyone has the product, and you charge more money, and now you're rich.
I think that's a big part. Like you want to have a great product, right?
That only
Great
worked
product
for Jason.
sells.
That like only worked for Jason Fried at Basecamp. Do you know that example? Do you know who that is?
I know Basecamp, but I don't know how big they went.
Oh, they're interesting. But their whole thing is that I don't know if people really will buy this, but for a lot of successful companies, especially in tech, it's right place, right time. And especially if it was SaaS and you were early in SaaS, and you reach your kind of like critical mass and you have vendor lock in, but also people are passionate about your product. They kind of were there then. They grew early, like 2004 or 3 is when they started. Then they created a Ruby on Rails, right? So that was like, there's a lot of this kind of, anyway, that's them. But the idea that you could build a product, have it be believed in so hard by your customers, and that alone would sustain you in SaaS is
It's a nice narrative that people
it's
like to talk
unlikely.
about it, but
Yeah.
the fact is, even any one of these viral products have to be sold very, very hard,
Yeah.
top down, right? Obviously, everybody thinks about Slack as like, gold standard in terms of product-led growth and users bring software into organizations. It's a great traction in the
Right.
beginning, maybe, but to sell big deals,
Yeah.
you need a big sales team, right? And well, specifically within an enterprise, I think it, it's product and is not enough because
It's not enough.
companies buy. It's a complex decision making process to buy a piece of software. So a good
So
product alone is not
let's
going to
talk
win.
about how you came to these realizations early on. Like you're three people, you're excited about your product. You build version 1 with
I mean,
your
it was so like there was never version one.
okay.
It was like super bare bones to like continuous evolution almost on daily basis into
Right.
better and better products. So there was never like distinct versions of it. It's like, I don't know, maybe if I was to time travel to like 2014, for example,
Yeah.
like the product was so basic.
Yeah.
And I think the kudos to people that used it back then, which is like amazing. I think that the one takeaway from it was that there's always going to be users that will jump on board on some like very rough MVP product. There's always innovators that want to try.
Well,
It's really hard to scale it beyond that.
I think that's an interesting observation though, right? Is that like especially in today's crowded digital landscape, is that like people really get hung up on feature sets when they're thinking about building digital products. They're like, we need to be competitive mindset to, or have a competitive mindset to set ourselves apart from all the other great things that are out there. Like, there's so many great things. And they make this assumption that their customers are going to be procuring in a competitive way, which for large enterprises, typically it does happen. However, if you solve the problem, which could be one of those 10 features that you offer, and you solve that really well, you're great in their mind, you know? And everyone's not procuring things in the same way, and they're not also assessing the total problem set that you're solving with your solution because they might only have one slice of that.
Yeah, I think in the beginning you really want to go narrow.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the lessons from Zero to One. That book I probably read most of any business book, but you want to go narrow because only then you can really solve a painful problem in a deep way. But as you scale up, you still, as you introduce new capabilities, you still want to understand. Like it's easy to try to do a lot of things,
Yeah.
but like only a few of them will be really really differentiated. So you got to understand like what is that true unique value proposition.
So if that was maybe not a value proposition or a narrative in your product evolution, right? What was that kind of narrative that early on was the lifeline to keep the product development kind of vision?
A lot of it came from our customers. Like we've always been very close to our customers. So every year now twice a year we send these really long customer surveys, and people write essays about things that they like, things they want us to see improve.
Yeah.
So we just have never-ending pipeline of people that want to talk to our product team about what they want to see exist on the market, and we just try to listen to them and try to build things that they want to see exist. So a lot of like when we started with these big principles, they sort of were like almost just a lens through which we can interpret some of the decisions, right? Like solution, automation, experience. But exactly how it translated into specific capabilities of the product, a lot of it was just customers telling us, "Oh, we would like to see this," right? So there's like that narrative about
Right.
car versus faster horse.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with building a faster horse. Like
Yeah.
people like faster horses.
Well, and it's also about access to market, I think, which is interesting because we're going to come back to like this lens from the flip from your customer perspective using your product to access their own markets. But which is kind of meta. But like, yeah, if you have access to a particular customer, that customer, or I guess I'll say it like this. With SaaS particularly, I think there's this kind of like, you know, temptation to assume that the whole world could be your customer. But then you generify your expectations for a relationship. And customers don't want a generic relationship with all the vendors that they rely on, because then it's anonymous. But they're not in their mindset anonymous, and they don't look at the world that way. So a lot of like hugely rolled out, I would say not necessarily successful, because a lot of these like, you know, $1 billion unicorn companies that are pumped with VC money may never be profitable, you know. And a lot of the mindset in those growth at all costs kind of companies are at odds with the customer reality often cases, you know. So I think this is an accurate observation, an interesting point to say that like learning from customers is kind of everything. Um,
At the end of the day, those are the most valuable dollars, because they will, well, in the perfect world, will continue coming, versus any other dollars. You know, they can dry up.
so when you started the company, how was it financed?
Financed ourselves in the beginning, and then we raised a little bit of seed / Series A, but it was fairly nominal. So we've been essentially bootstrapping ourselves. Well, not a lot of people were jumping on opportunity to write checks to 20-something-year-olds
Honestly,
who met online, months prior. So it doesn't build a lot of confidence. Looking back now,
yeah.
yeah, you guys are crushing it for 10 years together. That's, but in
But
the
in the early
moment,
days,
I don't know, would I invest in us back then if I met ourselves? I don't know. I think there's a lot of smart people, and it's not as obvious what's going to be successful. And I think in all honesty, in the last 10 years, there's so many things that presented themselves as opportunities that we just happen to be good at jumping on and pursuing and successfully getting to market. But in 2014, we didn't. It's not like we knew. It was like, here's the next 10 years will look like.
right?
Here's what the world will look like in 2024. Some of it stayed the same, but a lot of it changed.
So what's been the, I guess, the funding story since that first check? Like,
Oh, we almost immediately blew that money,
yeah.
and I'm glad we didn't take more money, because we would have we would have
'Cause it's
spent
like
that too.
we need to use this.
It's very easy to spend money. Like, it's very easy to
It's
spend money,
unfortunately very easy to spend money.
and you can spend any amount of money. It adds up very quickly. So thankfully, we raised very little amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we burned through it quickly, and we could move on to just building a more sustainable business.
Okay. And at what point though, in those days, like how much were you riding the line 2014, 15 between this like Bootstrap checks in from the customers, trying to scale to raise that revenue against the potentiality even of raising, because raising money from VCs, is also an arduous process and takes time, and
Yeah,
that
and we
takes you away
raised in
from revenue.
small increments. Yeah. Oh, we would describe it as walking on the edge of a knife.
Yeah.
Like, for years, it was just, you get used to it, but
Right.
looking back, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, the stresses of being an early stage entrepreneur are quite large.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would jump on to do it again.
Yeah, it's funny because I keep getting asked about this because I've got this weird business. It's very like chunky, right? And I come from software, so it's funny that like, yeah, everyone that knows me for decades is like, huh, you were one of the first internet pioneers in East Africa. Like, I was a teenager when the internet came to East Africa, and I was like running around with a bag of modems teaching people what the internet was. And I was in
Amazing.
high school, and then all these many things happened, and I was in software and SaaS and media, and this business particularly, because for me it's about like, I really believe that people need community and also need to share their stories, and that's a big thing. Um, but it's an interesting proposition that like you could start a business without the immediate path to profit, and definitely not without the immediate path to profit at scale. And that could be okay, but it's gonna take pain, and you got to be okay and prepared for that.
But to your point earlier, like, I think you need to have a healthy amount of
Pain.
delusion about,
Oh,
like, I think it's if you're going in thinking the whole world could be my customer, in some ways maybe that would be beneficial because it will be otherwise if you knew
Yeah.
all the realities, like I think it would the sort of the evidence would mount against you to do it. So you need to be an optimist.
Well, I say to this, like everyone, when you're an entrepreneur, I feel like everyone who loves you and who knows you could never understand what you do or why it's important that you do it. They're not against you. In fact, it's the opposite. Like your parents, your wife, everyone will support you. They think you're amazing. You're so intelligent. You're probably too intelligent to be doing what you because they don't want you to suffer. So they're looking at you and they're thinking, "Oh, I love this person," and they're suffering, and they don't need to suffer. Why are they suffering? Um, and it's really interesting because when you're building a product, especially a product that may have like relevance to a wide audience, um, a lot of people, I would say like this, a lot of people make mistakes in looking for market insights from people that are not within their market, and that's not just about can I sell this product to someone. It's like how can I get feedback on building a company to sell that product? And that's the entrepreneur's dilemma almost, is that like you're bound to be uh unto your own conviction. So you're right. To be delusional, to be an optimist will help balance out the harsh realities of the living day to day.
Yeah. Well, I think, building the company for the first time, there might be some, and there's definitely, I wouldn't say there's a blueprint. I don't think there's a blueprint for success, but
Yeah.
there's some general themes that are probably universal across businesses. But I remember distinctly, we were maybe 12 people, and there was a startup that had 60 people. And I remember bothering one of their founders. Was like, "How do you guys scale? Like, what are we not doing right? Like, why are we not scaling to where you guys are?"
Interesting.
But like now I look back and it's like it's not like
There's no clear boot. The
It-
blueprint.
it's
Okay.
not like we didn't know how to scale. It's just we
Yeah.
were just not ready for it.
Exactly. Yeah, because also scale isn't a linear thing. Like okay, let's talk about that now. Rewind it to now. So how many people is your team
Like
comprised?
1100.
1,100. 1,100 people. It's taken you kind of like 10 years to grow to this point. But at the same time, like how would you correlate your staff to, revenue or potential revenue? There's no direct correlation, right? To like team size and revenue generation capacity outside of your sales team.
Um, well, I think there are general benchmarks in the software industry where you would expect, average revenue per employee to land, and I
Yeah.
think those are good benchmarks to think about. But I think now, with AI, people talk about like, oh, one person, can generate millions of dollars.
Right.
I think it has probably a ceiling. Maybe there'll be some outliers, but I think there's a ceiling. And I think if you want to go big, you want to go with the team. And I think there might be products that can be built with a very small engineering team. But in our case, building an enterprise software that has so many use cases, you need to have a lot of people building the product.
So how does your kind of like staff, in terms of their function, how does the pie look? Like what percentage of your staff is sales versus, customer support? How does it break down? Do you know off the top of your head?
Yeah, roughly. I know it's around half in anything sort of that touches the customer.
Okay.
And it's not just sales and client services. We also put some other teams that sort of enable success of our sales team, like revenue operations, so forth.
Right.
About quarter or 30% engineering,
Yeah.
and then the rest are basically like business partnerships team, or like teams that enable creation of product and distribution of product.
It's kind of crazy to me to think of hundreds of engineers working on a product. At what point did you look at the scale of your operation and be like, "Wow, this is kind of nuts"? Or have you not gotten there yet?
I haven't gotten there yet, but
Okay,
there
that's
was
great.
maybe like one moment in January, we brought together the whole company for the first time
Wow.
in
Where
one
did you
room
even do that?
at Fairmont.
Oh,
We
here in Toronto.
yeah, in Toronto. So 1,000 people in one room, and it was tight. And that was the first time I was like, wow,
Wow.
this is quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then now, when I'm back to just regular work, I was like, we need way more people. Like
Mm-hmm.
all these things that we want to do, somebody needs to drive them. So
Right.
I could easily see now why companies growing to tens of thousands of people. There's just the market is huge,
Yeah.
and as you grow bigger, you need to have a lot of momentum in all these areas that you're investing in. It's no longer just like, oh, we do one thing very well. No, you need to build standalone, like, well, we have one product, but parts of the product need to continue evolving, and the complexity of them is becoming so much that you need to have teams building just parts of the product.
Part
So
of that is probably like a kind of a de-risked revenue model as well, right? Because you earn for different purposes, maybe. Like your client base comes to you to use different, I guess, has relative value to the function that they come to.
yeah, like from different industries. If customer comes from, if it's an e-commerce customer, their use case is going to be very different than customer in healthcare, for example.
Right.
But we want to be able to support their use cases that require a lot of different sort of not customization on the product, but capabilities that maybe they need to be in a much more advanced fashion for certain things.
Oh, for sure. Like, let's say you find that there's like automotive in Asia is a particular customer segment, but to refactor or develop the product in a way to support that industry properly, you know, there's gains that you could make, but you don't want to pre-sell that, and then product should fall short. So you got to build it out. And now it's like, okay, you have to react, and everything's pretty fluid. I think in business is the point in
It
terms
has to
of
be. It has to
scaling.
be.
Scaling's not a linear thing. That's where I was getting at. It's this fluid thing where you're always kind of like trying to be proactive, but for the most part, you also have to
Yeah, some of it
play
is,
defense.
you get actual data back and you look at the business and you're like, wow, there's an interesting momentum in this segment of the
Right.
business. Let's throw in more people at this and like let's try to accelerate this. Sometimes it's just a matter of conversations. We talk about something with clients and we're like, we don't have a data on this still, but let's put some people against it. Let's see if we can get something out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even at our size, it's not perfectly scientific all the time. And I think a lot of these like a lot of breakout type of products, like they come from a bit of a gut feeling around new opportunities.
Right.
Because once you have data out there, it's a lot of people also understand that it's an opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah. Before it becomes objective.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so true, man.
But one thing I heard that was interesting point, and I've been thinking about this for the last couple of years, is like every year you want to increase your total addressable market. So you want to think of like,
Yeah.
how can I solve more problems for more people, and push your team to engineer solutions to solve adjacent problems. Start building teams that sell into adjacent pockets of the market, and try to do it continuously. And like, yeah, some of it will not get as much momentum. Some of it will be breakout success, and that's the only way to continuously uncover new pockets of growth.
And this goes across the team. It's not just engineering, right? It's not just like product evolution.
Well, it's tied very deeply. Like we're selling product to a customer, so it's like R&D and distribution, they're very tightly connected. Sometimes it's originated at R&D level, and we say like, hey, we have this capability that we built. Let's get it to market. Sometimes market basically voice of customer tells us we need to build this. So whichever way it's done, we just want to always uncover like maybe new verticals or new customer types or new geographies. And I think a lot of companies are stuck, and I've seen this in Canada in particular.
Yeah.
They're stuck servicing one type of customer with one use case, and they expect growth, but it's just not suddenly going to come like by incremental innovation. You want to like really try to solve for bigger problems continuously.
Right. So how have you guys done this? Particularly, I'm interested in this because it's kind of the zeitgeist right now, right? At least in the tech ecosystem, there's this like, oh, Toby said this and Toby said that, but there's this kind of like rhetoric around critiquing a kind of a limited opportunity mindset in Canada, and companies growing to service Canada before they service the world. When, especially in software, I mean, you could open your doors to a foreign market, but be based here because this is your country. So, how does StackAdapt look at the world? I guess is the question.
We just try to think of ourselves as a global technology company. Obviously, Canada is where we started, but we're trying to build software for the world. And we have customers spanning, well, right now we're selling into 16 countries, but there's really no reason why we can't go into more countries.
Right.
I mean, it's a bit hard to comment about. I mentioned some startups here because I haven't really lived anywhere else. You probably, once you start spend enough time in any market, you just start seeing its own set of drawbacks and opportunities. But I think here is maybe there's I'm surprised, for example, how many companies just sell for Canadian customer. Like there's no reason not to go and sell to the United States out of the gate. Markets are very similar, unless there's some regulatory reasons.
If you're software and you're SaaS, and anyone can make use of your software, and this also brings us to your product, but and your primary, well, I guess, and you can acquire customers digitally. That's another thing. Then why not? It's silly. Like you got to go where the opportunity is for sure. English language and same time zone. Oh yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, I think being in Canada has its own lots of advantages. I think building the company out of Toronto was always a huge advantage for us, that we have such proximity to so many great universities.
Okay.
That, for example, produces so many great engineers. For a technology company, that's lifeblood. Where we've seen a challenge is just back to that blueprint, which maybe not necessarily definitively exists, but there's definitely level of pattern recognition that you get as you get more experienced. And in Canada, there's just not as many big companies that or people who have seen these companies grow up. So naturally, there's just a lot of talent like this in the States. And we understand that we cannot build a global company out of North America. We have to
be all over
be
the
almost
place.
like a, for all intents and purposes, a UK company to succeed in the UK, right?
Yeah.
And same thing across every other market. So we just try to think of ourselves a little bit less decentralized, and philosophically, legally we are a Canadian company.
Yeah.
But philosophically, I want us to think more about just how can we be like almost a no headquarters global technology company.
So how dispersed globally is your team currently?
Pretty dispersed, yeah.
Oh, it
So
is.
about half the companies in Canada and the rest are across the world, like with heavy presence obviously in the US, Western Europe, and like Singapore, Australia. So not across the world, but across many time zones.
Because I assume that there is, at the enterprise level, there's a need for presence that's physical to interface with customers, or not. I don't know.
Yeah, what we're learning is that you need to be present.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think being in North America, and having gone to spend some time in the UK, for example, or going to Asia, you just realize that, I don't know, being in Singapore, for example, it just feels like North America is just so far away, and there's a whole different universe of economies and companies, and it's just in Europe also, like I think in Europe you kind of feel North American business a little bit more because of similar language between obviously English language, but you go to Western Europe like Germany and you're just like, wow, this is a whole different universe here. Nobody knows us here. The companies we talk about, they don't know here. They don't know them. They talk to me about companies that I've never heard before.
Yeah.
So you
But
just
that's
realize
also
you
this part
cannot.
of this mindset here in North America, right? We have a North American exceptionalism kind of mindset.
Yeah, we're from North America. We came here to do business.
You know, we built the internet. Everyone speaks English. And then
Yeah,
you go
exactly.
out in the world and you're like, whoa, man.
Yeah, that
You know?
approach doesn't land as well internationally
Right.
as we learned, and we're trying to take a much more local and deliberate approach about building. I just saw our sales deck in Japanese this morning.
Oh,
And I was
that's
like, wow,
exciting. That's super exciting.
this is StackAdapt's deck in Japanese. I was like, well, that's cool.
That's really cool. That is awesome, man. That is awesome. Okay, so in global expansion, how do having offices come into that play? I know you said decentralized. So is that a necessity to have like actual, hubs where StackAdapt teams can be in, or are people remote first?
We're remote first. It's by virtue of us just like we went into COVID with like 170 people, and over the next 4 years after that, we just hired completely without any regard for where people are.
Yeah.
And so now people are everywhere. It's just impossible to imagine
Let's talk about
bringing
this.
them back into an office.
Yeah, and you don't know where new talent will be found, and you don't know how
Yeah.
they'll interrelate to different regions. And
Mm.
you brought everyone. You said this year you brought
Yeah.
them all together.
Yeah.
How did you do the programming for the occasion?
Oh, it was a whole production. A huge lift over a course of many months from the team.
Yeah,
But it was like a conference. We had for day one, it was like main stage, investor client interviews, lots of keynotes. It had its own like it was for all intents and purposes like a conference.
nice.
So lots of time spent to build the programming. And it was like the following days it was breakouts and all kinds of parallel tracks that team were putting together. So it was incredible. It was incredible.
And how much of this like growth story and visioning was shared by people from the team from around the world? Like I think of it as such an interesting opportunity for people to come together and like if the common thread is StackAdapt in their lives, explain and interface about that.
Yeah.
Because it means so many things. It's not just about the website and the product as you service it. Belonging to the company means something too, right?
I can't put myself I don't know how it feels for other people,
Right.
but I imagine is that for many people it was getting, well, maybe they've met a few people here and there in person, but for many people it was first time they were
With
like
other
really felt like
employees,
it
with
was
other
like, wow.
colleagues.
Yeah, like this is because like I don't know, on Slack on a
Yeah.
daily basis you talk to like 20 people. It never feels big, but then being in person, you're like, wow, there's a lot of, and everybody, like it's not just a random group of people like at a conference, where it's everybody's strangers. This is a team that's so deeply interconnected between each other in the way they support each other, the way they work together. And it was just incredible magic to see like of people, especially across different teams who've worked together, who've enabled to support each other, to be like, I've worked with you, like, thank you. Like that was like seeing these connections was amazing.
Okay, tell me something. Why do you think as it grows, right? And you're able to see such rapid growth in your headcount in the last in the last couple of years, you said,
A
right?
few years, yeah.
What do you think people coming into the organization are excited by about belonging to StackAdapt?
Well, I will speculate, and probably different people come for different reasons, but
Right.
I would say people are excited by opportunity of being part of an organization where we're just so relentlessly pursuing growth and innovation. Like I think we're just trying to move so fast. Like we're really, I feel like we're not sitting on our hands or waiting for things to happen. We're just trying to move as fast as we possibly can, and people want to be
Part of that momentum, right?
part of the momentum building. Like I think that excites people, and we love that.
Yeah.
So people who like that fast pace, rapid change, I think people thrive in that environment. I think we've built an environment where people can really be the most like authentic selves and bring themselves to work the way they are. And I think we've done a great job building an environment where people of any background can feel sense of belonging, and that's important.
That's huge. Of course, it's massive, especially with a remote team, right? If you're out there by yourself, digitally connected, sure, but you can't socialize your workplace because it's your house. Then the values you derive from your team culture and the people that you share time with in the day are really important, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I can sort of just even project on myself. I also work remote first.
So where do you live?
I live just outside of Ottawa. We
Okay.
moved there a couple of years ago, but I spend my days on camera just talking to people, but I never feel lonely, like because I spend my day talking to people
Wait,
that I feel.
you moved from Toronto
Yeah.
to outside of Ottawa. Was this a kind of you needed space and wanted to be away from the city
No,
kind
that
of
was
thing?
because my wife is from there, so we had
Oh,
kids,
okay,
and
okay.
we needed some more space for kids to be outside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how has
But
that transition been for you? Is it nice?
I'm very adaptable, I would say, so it's not super difficult. I love Toronto, so I am whenever I come here, I just get so energized.
Yeah, it's probably better to come back to Toronto than to like live here. It's great to live here, but it's you don't see the change by being in it all the time. I guess is my
I'm
thing.
sure, yeah, like it's always like this, right?
Yeah,
You live
grass is greener.
somewhere, you just get used to it.
Yeah.
But from now that I've left after 11 years, I'm like, I come back, I tell people like this city is it's bumping.
Yeah, it's a juggernaut. In many ways,
Yeah.
the evolution of Toronto is not seen by Torontonians. And I think that even literally, like, it's seen more by people in the GTA than it is downtown Torontonians.
Yeah.
And I think with the cost of living going up and with all these issues to do with, like, the urban politic being difficult, it's tougher and more expensive to be in the city. And I think that gets people down and gets them away from the joy of what you could experience in the city.
I think the
Yeah.
unfortunate truth is that the same thing is happening across every
Everywhere.
major metropolitan area.
Yeah.
But the fact remains is that, in Canada, to do business, this is the best place.
One thing that's amazing that you have the potential to do in Canada is reach out to other people. You mentioned you went to a competitor and were asking how do you scale?
Not a competitor, but another company.
Any
Mhm.
other company. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
not in segment. But the idea that you can do that in Canada, like you should try and pursue those conversations because in other territories that's more difficult.
Yeah.
And also companies should work together to grow relative strengths. I'm not seeing as much of that now as was the case maybe 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's something that people need to work on.
But obviously everything I say has to be taken with a grain of salt because I have my own set of biases. Like there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
With respect to what life is like in Toronto or what it's like to start a business. I think the truth is 10 years ago, it was not easier to start a business than it is now. Arguably, it was harder.
Yeah.
Right? It was just different. It was just different, right? And I think like it's never going to be easy to start and build a business.
Right.
Just like it's not going to be easy to have a successful career if you're taking the path of just growing within being a part of some company. Like none of it is like today's world is inherently very competitive. And I think it's just all about how we as individuals just
navigate through what the tools are.
Exactly. Become better versions of ourselves to be more successful, to be better members of the community, be better people when it comes to enabling your colleagues or business partners, and a lot of it comes from internal.
Yeah, I think so. And I think a big part of that or what can support that is a sense of opportunity. And it's true. In Canada, there are certain opportunities. We might not have immediate market scale within our borders for a lot of things, but we have the ability to get started, which is pretty huge.
Yeah, but all these obstacles, they are opportunities, right?
Yeah, it's just a reframing.
Like right now, to me, it's just when we look at what the state of the world is, there's so many things that need to be fixed and
Right.
improved, right? I think it's so important to approach it with a perspective of like, how can I play an active role of making this place, this world a little bit better? Maybe it doesn't have to be on a global scale, but
Yeah.
how can it be done at a local scale? Like, how, in which way I can play an active role of improving my community, right? And I think, there's probably no better time
Mm.
than now to take this very proactive way of contributing to society at large. It can be in the form of a business, it can be in the form of volunteering, charity, starting your own initiatives, own projects. People are so hungry to be part of something bigger, and there's so many people that want to join a mission, and people who are who are passionate about something. They should
Right.
just pursue that passion, and they will be surprised how many people wanna follow them.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of this kind of, I think we've got a convolution of entertainment media in the last, 5-10 years. Um, Advertising media has become as masquerading as entertainment, and that's kind of, scapegoated perhaps people's, apathy, especially with the pandemic that was compounded with our lockdowns, prolonged lockdowns. But like, I think you're right. Like, we are in a time of unprecedented uh, power in terms of digital communication, and that should be used to gather people, to, anything, to solicit support where you can. There's obviously like, you know, uh, war torn countries right now that we want to help. We want to help those people. And, our help might be limited to donating to a charity that's operating on the ground. For sure. We can't like use the internet to protect an area that's like in conflicts or something like that, or extricate people and, with human sized drones or anything like that. But there's a lot of power at our disposal to be able to communicate. That's the way I look at it, and especially us at Startwell facilitating, teams to gather in person, companies to be more communicative across hierarchies and power dynamics. Um, that yields amazing results for productivity ultimately, for people to be able to just kind of say, wow, we can all collaborate and take ownership over the problems at this company and future proof it with solutions and work together. And then, additionally with the media stuff, I think that's something that we're big on here. Like, we don't just produce content, we do things like this where we're sharing stories, because the power of communication is something that is so intriguing to me. The fact that we can record this conversation and anyone in the world will be able to engage with it and take from it, that's powerful. We couldn't upload a video 10 years ago in 4K and on every platform and in audio and cut it up. Like, to even edit this episode, this might be a 1 hour episode, to edit it would have taken a week 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I think that the power of digital technology, of course, and media and communication tech is awesome. And also, I have to ask, how does StackAdapt play into this? Like, you must be excited for how the product has evolved and where it's going to go in terms of reducing complexity within the advertising space, right? For people that are like, whether they're SMBs or enterprise, but like they want a simple tool they can rely on to be able to either acquire new customers or otherwise push messaging, right?
Yeah, I think what excites me is sort of just opportunities. I reflect on just how difficult it is to build a business and grow a business, and I think everybody would probably universally say that it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, that just signals again opportunity, because that means that there's a ton of value to be created to help companies be more successful, to make that probability of success a little bit higher for companies that we can work with. So it really feels like, for everything that exists out there in terms of technology and software that has made really meaningful impact on the economy,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's still so much more to come. And I think the next couple of decades is going to be just so exciting.
Yeah, I agree. I haven't asked you that much about the future. What do you think? Are there any top level observations or expectations you have for I would say like the future of digital advertising? I know that's a big question, but we talked about programmatic. Uh, Pre-camera, we were talking a little bit about how that's changing, right? Like reliability of, whether it's a cost of user acquisition, ultimately, calculation or otherwise, justifying ad spend digitally is something that's been a bit fluid in the last year or two, and people have questions. So, what can you see through, if anything, through the next couple of years that people might find useful?
I think in general, sort of looking beyond advertising, and I want us to think more bigger than advertising, because
Mm.
advertising is just, it's an effective distribution channel, but it's not enough, right? The way companies grow, they have to do so many things
Right.
to be successful, right? So we, in terms of, as a B2B technology company, inherently we need to do a lot more than just advertising to make them successful. And I think a lot of it comes back to just better understanding of their own business, because reflecting on what we do as a company, it is hard to understand what even works. We have so many teams of analysts who are just looking at just mountains of data in all these different ways to understand, like, what is about our business that's working? How can we magnify that?
Right.
What's not working? How can we fix it? It is, some of it is obvious, some of it is hidden in this just unimaginable amount of data. And I think every business faces the same challenge, is that many businesses are flying by the seat of their pants when it comes to running their business. And it's
Right.
because they have very vague understanding of what's actually working, or what makes them unique, or what kind of opportunity they have in front of them, and how can they effectively take advantage of it.
It's so interesting, that point, because there was a story that came out in the news this week, so like yesterday, I think, or on the weekend, that the stock price of Chorus Entertainment. So Chorus Entertainment is like one of the largest private kind of, or yeah, uh, entertainment companies in Canada. I believe their Nelvana Animation Studio is the one who makes Paw Patrol. If your kids watch that, I don't know. Yeah,
I know
Paw
of it,
Patrol.
yeah.
Um, and uh, and this company brings in about 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion dollars of annualized revenue, but for the last 2 quarters has been like just not making cash flow break even, and they're going down from like 15% loss in a quarter, or no, from like 10% loss in a quarter to the next quarter is 15% losses. And I keep hearing this from business people in Canada, and I think a lot of them are focused on the Canadian market. They're not focused on being able to leverage our access to the world. Um, but the idea that if you limit your horizons, you won't be able to realize new opportunities is so pervasive. I keep seeing that. And so I think you're right. Like, companies need to think holistically. They need to look for opportunities, because even if a company that's making over $1 billion a year, they're obviously doing stuff, and they're doing stuff that works. A
They're
lot
very
of it's
busy,
that's
yeah.
working. You would think that a $1.2 billion revenue could be turned into $2.5 billion revenue pretty quickly. But who's going to do that? And how are they going to find that information and dig through it all and make it actionable?
Yeah.
Everyone's probably just busy doing their work every day. So stuff's working, but it's like, it's a small hole in the ship. Don't worry about it.
Well, even some of the largest companies in the world, they can find themselves in the same situation, right? They can miss a big trend that comes every, half a decade or a decade, and that they become irrelevant. It
Right
is,
place, right time is often about keeping your eyes open.
yeah, exactly. At any scale, whether you're a startup or a massive, Fortune 500 company, I think, like, nothing is written. And
Yeah.
I think that's what excites me, is that the way the world will look like 10 years from now will look very different. Top companies will be very different.
Mm-hmm.
Just like reflecting, if we're in 2014, we
Right.
would think about who would be the biggest companies.
Right.
Would we think, for example, Nvidia be one of those companies?
Yeah.
I think many people would not call that, for example.
For sure.
10 years, it will look very different too.
Right.
So that means that so much new value will be unlocked by new companies potentially. So again, back to the point of all comes back to action.
Action, being able to look with wide eyes, think globally, and keep an ear to the ground for customer trends and look at what customers need and want, right? Ultimately, especially if you have those relationships. I think often cases companies may ignore what they have by treating them as an asset. You know, it's like, hey, yeah, we own those relationships, but the new ones are the biggest opportunities. When really you're building kind of a community around your brand, right? It was a pleasure taking time to chat. I know
Thanks
you've
for
got to
having
jump
me.
on an airplane, so we want to get you to the airport soon. And yeah, thanks for spending time here at StartWell, man.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure.
Awesome. Cheers.